Now, I've said this many times and I'll say it again, but whenever we go over any subject related to George Clooney and all the shenanigans revolving around this actor, you might as well call it Clooney Tunes, because it's that crazy and insane based on what George Clooney is doing behind closed doors and or in the public eye, and how there are so many within the general public that just really resent this guy now, after everything that he did in the political commercial, after all the comments that he displayed in the public eye, and everything else that came along with it. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. Now, we are seeing this turn of the tide. It may be coming in a very slow pace, but we are beginning to see more and more studios waking up and really booting a lot of these different actors and actresses, writers, directors, producers that really do engage in politics excessively, by the way, and are calling it quits on them. We've seen this happen with Julia Roberts, Robert De Niro, Alec Baldwin, and yes, even George Clooney over at Warner Brothers, and we have a lot to talk about that today, by the way, about how he's now taking action against CEO David Zaslav and the many studio executives over there, the board of directors, etc., etc. Let's jump into this. Now, what's interesting about this is that we know that George Clooney has been strategically planning on how to really deal with the situation over at WB. For those of you that are not in the loop or have no clue what I'm talking about, he was fired from various projects over at WB, and entirely. The many projects revolved around Ocean's 14 and the many Oceans related spin-off films and even a TV series for HBO Max. They wanted to expand this thing into becoming a Fast and Furious scaled type of franchise. But what's interesting about this is that with the entire film industry now going through a slow turn of the tide as some major Hollywood studios begin to fire an axe many actors and actresses that engaged well too much in politics, one major development going on now involves more to do with George Clooney and how he is now beginning to take action toward Warner Brothers after getting fired from various films connected to the Ocean's franchise. Now, this all comes weeks after WB's CEO David Zaslav decided to axe projects, like I said before, Ocean's 14 and the many spin-off films that Clooney was going to be involved in as Danny Ocean, and how they were going to undo Danny Ocean's death that was mentioned, by the way, in Ocean's 8, the all-female-led film a couple of years ago. All of those plans are now officially done for, and George Clooney is already gathering a legal team to challenge David Zaslav's decision, and is going beyond the legal warnings against WB and is now gathering a legal team to make a case against those like Zaslav and the studio executives for making this call. Now, Clooney's arguments behind the scenes is that they axed him from these projects for making a political opinion, and how he believes that this was unprofessional behavior coming from those like Zaslav and the board of directors at WB. Now, Clooney also made a defensive argument recently against the WB studio execs that he would call off the legal actions against WB if and only if they reinstate all of the Ocean's films that he was signed on for beforehand, that he was booted from, that are now going to be replaced with other films from the James Gunn DC Universe films. Already, David Zaslav is refusing to even consider reversing that action that he made by replacing Clooney's films with James Gunn's movies, and how David's argument is that this cannot be undone now at this time, since WB views those films as a larger investment with a higher success rate than the Ocean's franchise. So guys, let me just say one thing about this. I think that was the one wise move coming from David Zaslav, is by focusing more on James Gunn and what he's trying to do with DC and all the superhero films like Superman, Batman, Supergirl, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, the whole 9 yards. So now George Clooney's getting very much in a fuss. He's getting very angry about the fact that not only was he fired from the Ocean's franchise, from WB entirely, but those slots for those movies, for the Ocean's films, are being replaced by James Gunn's DC Universe films. And you guys may not actually remember this, or may not even know this, but George Clooney actually had a deal with WB that he would get the Ocean's movies if and only if he would make an appearance as Bruce Wayne / Batman at the very end of the Flash movie in 2023 as this end credit, post credit type of sequence, right? And he did. He appeared in that film as Bruce Wayne. nobody expected it or even saw that coming because of how much George Clooney hates that role of Bruce Wayne and how much of an impact it made on his career, you know, because it's very cheesy, it's very comedic. But looking at all of this, you know, in the rearview mirror now, the fact that WB really did boot George Clooney from those movies, they want nothing to do with him anymore, and now Clooney believes by making a legal case that he's going to get those projects back on the table. Moving on forward, alright? However, Zaslav also makes this debate, that Clooney was being very complex and difficult with creative choices and decisions in the making of Ocean's 14 and the many spin-off films that were going to actually be made. There were even plans of doing an Ocean's TV show for HBO Max that was going to expand the Ocean's family, and Clooney wanted to double down on the TV show. Zaslav felt that this was leaning too much into becoming something like Fast and Furious with Universal, and argued with Clooney that this was going to go south and had no value no matter what, no matter how you would market the show on HBO Max. And guys, you know what? It's completely correct, I think, coming from David Zaslav. As much as I am of a critic of the CEO, and I have been for many, many years, as much I am of Bob Iger over at Disney, this would have very much been like Fast and Furious. I mean, look at what Fast and Furious is all about now. It's all just mindless action, one after the other. I think it should have been called off many years ago. And the fact that they wanted to double down and how George Clooney wanted to basically make it a series of films and TV shows focused on family, action, drama, etc. They basically wanted to go that Fast and Furious route, except instead of it being about cars, it would be about heists and stuff like that, right? Which Fast and Furious kind of taps into that too a little bit. But those creative differences are said to have been the early stages of the grudge between both Clooney and CEO David Zaslav before Clooney's firing took place, which was done in a similar way, by the way, to how Robert De Niro was fired from the 2 Mob Boss movies by WB that were going to be produced. Clooney is already moving ahead to make the legal case active by this March against WB unless they reinstate those movies. Which, by the way, guys, I don't believe, and I highly doubt, that WB is going to cave to George Clooney's demands and reverse every action that they took. Now, say what you will about James Gunn's upcoming Superman movie. I know people have differing opinions on it. The trailer, from what I saw, it looked not too terrible. I do have some criticisms about it here and there, but it looks pretty solid so far. I mean, nothing to really complain about. But there have been a lot of test screenings, internally speaking, over at the studio that has not been going too well for James Gunn's Superman film. So who knows if David Zaslav will cave to George Clooney's demands and say, hey, you know what, maybe we'll do a complete 180. I highly doubt it, though. I think that they are sticking to their guns, no pun intended, and they are gonna stick with the DC Universe films and focusing more on that instead of the Ocean's franchise. And I think it's a good move on WB's part, to be very honest. But overall, I would like to hear what you all have to say about this below in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.